Hello and welcome to the Mystic Cast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics, a member of the Etheria Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the selfsame quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Etheria Society. Today, our guest is Bir Singh Khalsa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you. You're a giant in the field of yoga.
Well, very small part of yoga, the scientific research part of yoga. Yes, I have devoted a good deal of effort into promoting and conducting research on yoga.
Yeah, I mean, just to give our listeners a little bit of information about you, you work at the Kundalini Research Institute.
Yes, that's the organization run by the yoga lineage I'm a part of, which is Kundalini Yoga. That is, I've held that position for about 10 years, but it's a secondary position, if you will. My primary position is at Harvard Medical School in Boston.
Okay. Yeah, it's difficult to get it in order because you're also with the Yoga Alliance and you publish the International Journal of Yoga Therapy. It's hard to know what takes up most of your time.
Yeah, so my primary appointment is an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School in Boston, at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I've conducted research out of that. But I also have a strong relationship with the International Association of Yoga Therapists. I serve as the editor-in-chief of their International Journal of Yoga Therapy, and also as coordinator of the annual symposium on yoga research. I was previously director of research for the Yoga Alliance, but that position has passed.
Well, I think you've got enough on your plate.
Yeah, I keep myself busy, although I am pulling back as I'm getting older and sort of moving into sort of a preferred retirement mode.
Mm-hmm. Well, so maybe I can ask you a few personal questions about my pranayama practice, and maybe because my regular audience would get a lot from it because they do similar practices to me. So, and I know you've written a lot about pranayama. You know, I'm here in the south of Italy. I don't have no one's into it around here. I've got no one I can chat to. So it's I should take this precious opportunity to chat to someone like yourself about it to deepen my pranayama practice.
Sure.
So I struggle with, like many people, like a blocked nose. I have a young son. He's 1.5 years. So I've got constant infections. Especially in the winter, my health's suffering. So I have difficulty with the alternate nose breathing. You know, I use a neti pot, and I bought another super huge one, salt douche. You just press the button, and a half a liter of salty water goes through your nostril. And I've tried various eucalyptus, I've tried many things. So maybe there's something you could help me. You must get this a lot, asked the question a lot.
Well, not really, but I am familiar with the nasal passages, and in particular, when you're referring to the alternate nostril breathing, one of the things that many people don't realize is that there is a nasal cycle, and that one nostril is dominant at any one point in time over the other. That's an autonomic reflex. And we don't understand exactly what the purpose of that reflex is, but it's a very sort of rough cycle. It switches anywhere from 2 to 5 hours per nose. And so at any one point in time, one nostril has more airflow through it than the other. And one of the problems that's been observed for some people is that they have a nasal blockage of some kind, whether it's an allergy or whether it's a nasal polyp, some kind of physical obstruction. Then when the other nostril is not dominant, then they have difficulty breathing. And the reason most people don't notice that they have a nasal cycle is that overall, the nasal airflow between the two nostrils is the same. The resistance of airflow is the same because one is dominant and then it switches. But if somebody has a blockage in one nostril, then when it switches for that nostril to be open and it happens to be blocked, that's when they start to notice that there's
Okay, yeah, I've tried a yoga danda because I notice like if I lie on one left side or right side, I can get my nose to switch. But yeah, it's always the problem with too much mucus as well. It's just, is there a way I can reduce the mucus in the nose?
Well, that's going to be more along the lines of, allergic functioning and allergies and so on. And that's something that maybe conventional medicine needs to be consulted with respect to what can be done with that. But from a yogic perspective, I'm not a yoga therapist per se, so I can't offer much in terms of that kind of therapeutic approach.
And from your personal experience, I mean, once you're up to speed with the alternate breathing, I think, once your nadis are clear, once you're flowing, you get less of these problems now. Would you say from your own personal experience?
Well, I think that what happens with pranayama is that as you continue to practice, it starts to become, well, first of all, it becomes easier to do. You become better at it. Just like anything, just like any physical activity, it's a behavioral practice. And so as you practice these techniques, whether it's long, slow breathing or the rapid breathing techniques like Kapalabhati or breath of fire, you become better at those practices. What also then happens is a longer term change that usually takes along the lines of sort of multiple weeks and months, in which your respiratory system starts to change its characteristics. And those are sort of semi-permanent long-term changes. One of those changes is in your respiratory system's response to both carbon dioxide and oxygen. It changes. And another thing that changes is actually the respiratory rate and the depth of breathing changes. So there was one study that showed that after several months of long, slow, deep breathing, people's spontaneous breathing rates slowed down, and the favored the exhale. So the exhale became a little bit longer with that practice. So that's a sort of a permanent change in the respiratory frequency. And of course, respiratory frequency is tied together with emotional states and so on. So that is something that is a sort of a general belief that the slower respiration is associated with lower stress levels, lower psychophysiological arousal. And we also know from now a very strong and growing body of research evidence that slow breathing has multiple benefits. It includes things like not only stress modulation, but also pain and emotional regulation. So it's highly beneficial, and people that tend to be breathing more rapidly tend to be, more anxious in that sense.
Yeah, I've really found I don't have trouble with the slow breathing. I can do comfortably, 2 breaths a minute, when I'm doing my practices. Or when I was in India, I was having some treatment, with the special Ayurvedic oils from this ancient lineage, and they were so heavy with prana. I could breathe in for 1.5 minutes and out for 1.5 minutes. It was really like I was so full of prana. I haven't been able to do that ever since I had that. But so I don't struggle with the slow breaths, but I think they make me very relaxed. But what kind of breath could I do is like what pranayama is like a cup of coffee? What would just pick me up?
Well, the idea there is that the rapid breathing, increases sympathetic activation, which is the fight or flight kind of response. And so rapid breathing practices like Kapalabhati, Bhastrika, and breath of fire all are said to be sort of more activating in that sense. Now, many people actually think that that's a sort of a permanent thing. So people go as far as to say, well, people with high blood pressure shouldn't practice those techniques because they're activating. Well, the problem is with that way of thinking is that they don't understand that after the rapid phase, there is a relaxation phase that goes deeper in terms of relaxation than before you started the practice. So a bout of Kapalabhati practice, for example, yes, it will be activating when you're doing it and probably a little bit thereafter. But shortly after that, your whole system then relaxes to a level that is below
really, that's
the
interesting.
level of stress and tension before you started practicing. This is the tension release phenomenon. You tense your muscles very tight, whether it's in your hands or your arms, and then you release them. The level of relaxation takes you deeper than before you tense the muscles. And so this is a phenomenon that's well known in the whole field of psychology in terms of the progressive relaxation practice, tense and release.
Okay. Yeah, so that's because I'd like to get up at 3:30 in the morning and sleep less. It's very difficult though. What through your practices, what have you found the most useful for sleeping less so you can practice more?
Well, the whole idea of sleeping less is, there's a whole belief in the meditation yoga world that, the more you meditate, the less you need sleep. And that is true within a very, very narrow.
Really?
And I think that many people who are yoga practitioners and meditators have a sort of misperception of the importance of sleep.
Really?
I think it is very important for people to have, on average, 7.5 to 8 hours a night.
Wow.
And people that don't do that in the general population, and a third of the general population is typically sleeping less than 6.5 hours a night, they're experiencing essentially cumulative sleep deprivation. And that cumulative sleep deprivation is a major risk factor for a variety of different problems, including daytime sleepiness, impairments in cognitive performance, impairments in memory, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, and hypertension, and in addition to a number of cardiovascular diseases. And that is, I believe, a major contributor to the epidemic of non-communicable diseases, which are those same diseases. And I think sleep deprivation in the general population, people's misunderstanding of our need for sleep is really a major problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we stumbled into your area of specialty.
Yes, you have. Yeah, I'm in the division of sleep medicine at Harvard Medical School, which is one of the leading divisions in that field in the world.
So you're a 7.5 hour guy.
Yes, I tried the best I can to maintain that rigor of getting that 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep.
So I just need to go to bed at 8 o'clock if I want to get up at.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, in my younger days, when I lived in an ashram with, 30 people, we would be up at 3:30 in the morning, taking cold showers and starting our yoga practices at 4 in the morning. And we always thought and believed, wow, it's all about getting up in the morning. And it's not really about getting up in the morning in terms of being successful and maintaining that. The trick in that is going to bed early in order to be able to get up that early. And, we would go to the movies at 9 o'clock in the evening, get home at midnight, and then wake up in 2.5 hours and expect that we would be able to do this. And, for 20 or something year old, that was somewhat feasible, but not sustainable over the long term. And then, as I say, associated with significant consequences.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's wonderful to hear someone of your experience also, doing so much research in it to kind of give me that information is very, very helpful. Thank you.
The one thing that I would add is that although it's not an hour for hour exchange, in other words, you can't meditate for an hour and expect to sleep less for an hour. When you do practice yoga and meditation, you do improve the quality and depth of your sleep.
There we go. Yeah.
So that does mean that, yes, the quality of your sleep will improve. You'll have less awakenings. The sleep will be deeper. And then presumably you will probably get by with marginally less number of hours of sleep that you need. You could probably go down to 7.5 to 7 comfortably, as long as you have really good, deep quality sleep.
Yeah.
So yes, it can improve your sleep.
Do you advise people use I'm started using mouth tape, and
there's controversy over that. I'm not an expert on that particular practice, but for people with nasal difficulties, and I've had nasal congestion from time to time, these nasal strips are very benign, the ones that go over the nose, the spring clips. They do increase the nasal flow and can prevent snoring and mouth breathing to some degree. And I found those very helpful. They're very benign. There's no negative consequences. Whereas taping the mouth, I think there's mixed information scientifically on the safety and wisdom of doing it.
Oh, okay.
People swear by it, but Others and some scientists are indicating caution with respect to that.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I was reading this book, Breath, by James Nestor. I had him on my other podcast, and it was interesting, really, to get the scientific perspective on as well. And there's erectile tissue in the nose, so it's very responsive. So when we relax, then also the nose is open, and you can get flow through both nostrils, through mental control as well once you get to that level.
Right.
Yeah, I do have a young child at the moment, so a lot of the communicable diseases are out of my hands. I keep getting sick, and yeah, but I keep doing my practices. So hopefully it's only a temporary thing.
Yeah.
So in the Aetherius Society, so Dr. King, he was a master of yoga. He did Kundalini Yoga. I mean, he did 8 hours a day for 10 years in the 1950s in England, while having a full-time job as well. So he did all the most dangerous Kundalini practices, but he advised us not to do it. He says that, Karma Yoga is the yoga for the age, and he raised Kundalini all the way, and he became an adept, and so he could channel the masters because he was on their level. He could go into samadhi to receive a transmission. So, but he gave us a very 6 simple breaths that we should do. So you do the alternate nose breathing with a hold in, then alternate nose breathing with a hold out, and then hold the breath, and then do the sipping breath, and then finally the hands in the ears over the eyes.
Yes.
As just one time, which is to so that he said that was of all the yoga's breaths that he created this perfectly balanced practice that we do. So I've got very good at the long, slow breathing. So I don't do so much of the Kabbalah Badi or the Tumo, like the Wim Hof breath, the fire breath. I don't do so much of that. Do you, in the morning when I wake up, I'm a bit tired, do you think I should do that to kind of fire up the system? Or?
Well, I think pranayama at any point in time is going to be beneficial. But yeah, I mean, I think doing a rapid breathing technique in the morning to get yourself going is not a unheard of strategy within the yoga world. One thing I have to say is that our lineage of Kundalini Yoga is somewhat different than what there are many lineages that call themselves Kundalini Yoga. Now, of course, there's no copyright on that term. But our lineage is Kundalini Yoga is taught by Yogi Bhajan. It is probably the most popular version, and it is most popular in the United States, in Europe, and in South America. And then it's also growing popularity in China and Australia. But our lineage really, and I get a lot of emails for this, people having Kundalini experiences, approaching me as a Kundalini Yoga teacher, asking for my expertise. And to be honest, we don't deal with that because our focus is really a very gradual, controlled, and sustained development. We are not interested in sudden Kundalini experiences. That's not our goal. That's not the way our yoga practice is. So I'm actually completely not capable of addressing people's Kundalini experiences because we don't really work with those. Of course, those are prevalent in the population. People have spontaneous Kundalini experiences. Some people have them with practice of yoga. And one of the important things with Kundalini experiences, I think, is to be able to distinguish whether that experience in a particular individual is actually a Kundalini awakening or is a psychotic episode. Because the overlap in the description and symptoms of a psychotic episode and a Kundalini awakening is really quite noticeable, quite marked. And many people who have claimed to have a Kundalini awakening really are having a psychotic episode. And so what you need is a psychiatrist who's familiar with this phenomenon to be able to create, to be able to work with the patient or the individual to really come up with a diagnosis as to whether this is a helpful or a problematic experience. Because many people who have these, the reason they report it is because it's become an uncomfortable thing for them. That kind of leans in the direction of more of the psychotic episode, because the Kundalini awakening is essentially a spiritual process. And people who are experiencing a problem with that, they feel unstable and so on. That's an indication that it is not under their control, that it's not regulated, that it's not smooth spiritual growth and transition. It is an unwanted phenomenon that has caused them problems in their day-to-day life. So that's why it's so important to really, the first step is to really distinguish whether what you've got is a Kundalini awakening or a psychotic episode. In any case, I think that ironically, the best strategy is to practice yoga, because what yoga is, it's the ability to self-regulate your internal state, both psychological and physiological. And of course, this experience is a phenomenon that occurs through the brain. And so yoga is going to help you self-regulate your brain processes to bring them under some degree of positive self-control. And that would include unwanted Kundalini experiences, in my view.
Well, that's really good to hear you say that your path is the slow and steady path, because in my simple understanding, it's quite easy. If you want to awake Kundalini, you can do some really serious, dangerous practices very quickly. And then, it can be chaos and lead to be Kundalini and a psychotic episode if you haven't, because there's so much energy, no? I mean,
exactly. You need to have the body and the mind prepared in order to have these kinds of unitive states occur. Because if they happen in a very sudden way, you have a negative experience. And of course, we knew this back in the late 60s when so many of us in the counterculture were experimenting with these hallucinogenic drugs. And many people would have a really strong mystical experience. And those people who were not prepared for that, or who had certain psychological limitations, would suffer as a consequence of that experience. It was not something that they were prepared for. So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. King said he knew people been driven stark raving mad or in a wheelchair, and it affects you also for the next life. I think you have to be prepared in the body from many past lives to achieve a proper Kundalini awakening. It's a cumulative process, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has to be done very carefully and very gradually. And unfortunately, when people go into the literature, the yoga literature is all very exciting. You start reading about Kundalini and, exploding the brain, and it's all just like fantastic stuff. And you want to do that. But it's, this can be a serious experience. And if the individual is not prepared and hasn't done the spiritual work, both psychological and physiological, that can support that experience and integrate it into one's life, then it's going to be problematic.
Yeah, I wouldn't even, and the concentration as well. Dr. King said you have to be able, if you can concentrate for 5 hours on a keyhole without any other thought coming into your head, you're beginning to concentrate.
Yeah, I mean, that's self-regulation of attention, which is the heart and core of what meditation is. It is the engagement of the attention now. Whether you're doing concentrated meditation or single point focused meditation, as we mostly do in yoga, where you focus on a mantra or a word or a candle, or whether it's the more sort of Buddhist-oriented open focus mindfulness meditation, in which your focus is on the flow of sensation or the flow of thought. In either case, you are training your attention networks to be able to focus. And that means you gain the ability to self-regulate your own thought processes. You become less reactive to your own thought processes. You become less reactive, therefore, to your own emotions. You become more capable of, regulating your thought processes. And that really is the core of not only its therapeutic benefit, but its sort of benefit overall on psychological state. Because in depression, major depression or anxiety disorder, it's really the thoughts that are a key element of the disorder. And the whole process of either cognitive behavioral therapy or meditation is to gain self-regulation of your thought processes.
And the spiritual path is peaks and valleys. No, the higher you go, the higher the experience you have, that you must be followed by a valley. You will experience a depression, and you've just learned to be able to control that. Does that ring true with you?
Well, I think there's ups and downs. It's not possible to be high all the time. And that is something that one has to realize. It's not possible to be high all the time, but it is possible to be healthy all the time and functional all the time. And that's what we aim for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So what's your personal practice, if you don't mind me asking? What do you do on a daily basis?
So right now, my yoga practice is pretty much down to about 3 times per week. I practice about an hour, 3 times a week. And that is sustaining enough for me at this point in my life.
And what does that involve? Is that asanas or pranayama?
Yeah, it's mostly an asana set out of our practices.
Okay. So what do you do? Do you notice your breathing? Because one thing I struggle with as well, is I'm okay in the morning when all the lights are off and, I've got everything set and I'm counting my breaths, but then can go to buggery when I'm, working on the computer and you're taking short, shallow breaths, or you do this thing where you hold your breath because breaths are brain waves. So are you able to control your breath when you're working? Should we try and maintain long breaths all through the day? Or?
I think it's beneficial to do that, to be aware of your breathing, as it is to be aware of your own thought processes, because the more you are aware of what's going on with you, the more you're capable of changing that and putting yourself in a different direction. So again, this is all self-regulation of thought processes. Not only are you improving the attention networks, your ability to focus your attention, you are also improving your ability to attend. You become more sensitive. You become more tuned in to subtleties of your own psychological and physical functioning. And that awareness is critical because, the majority of society really have low levels of mind-body awareness.
Mm-hmm.
They have very low levels of, their response to what's going on, to where they are. People are walking around with the shoulders up to their ears, their physical tension. They're not even aware that they're holding their shoulders. And so this is one of the things that happens with these contemplative practices, is that you develop that internal mind-body awareness. And the internal state, the awareness of the internal state, is called interoception. This awareness of what's going on internally. And awareness is the first step in change. If you're not aware, how could you possibly change? It's the first step, for example, in someone who is addicted to some kind of substance. The first step is to become aware of your behavior, become aware of your addiction. Because if you're not aware that you're addicted, how could you possibly make a change? And that's true with any kind of maladaptive function or behavior. If you're not aware of it, how can you possibly change it? And as I say, most people in modern society have low levels of mind-body awareness. And to me, this is actually directly reflected into the epidemic of non-communicable diseases. The risk factors for non-communicable diseases are low levels of physical activity, poor dietary choices, and dysfunctional health behaviors like cigarette smoking, excessive alcohol consumption. And then I would add a fourth one of chronic stress. And most people are not aware of how stressed they are. Most people are not aware of the effects of junk food on their body. I mean, this is what is a major contributor to these non-communicable diseases, these high refined, high sugar foods, high fat foods with low nutritive value. And people can imbibe these things without experiencing any negative consequences. But I can tell you that once you start practicing a contemplative practice for a few months, and then you go back and have some junk food, you almost feel like you're going to throw up because you just say, how could I possibly have eaten this stuff before? I can't even tolerate it now. And so that sensitivity, that mind-body awareness, that interoception is really a key player, not only in terms of the contemplative practice and spiritual growth, but just in terms of life and death on the planet, because 90% of the population is dying from these non-communicable diseases. And the same is true not only for dietary awareness, but also for physical activity. I mean, we're a sedentary society. And most people will go to the gym because they feel like they have to, and they're not aware of the positive effects of the exercise. You practice yoga for a few months, you go back to the gym, you notice, wow, I feel much better. How come I didn't notice how good I feel after a workout before I started practicing yoga? And that's because you've improved your sensitivity to the positive rewards of those positive behaviors. And so that is an automatic behavior change mechanism. And behavior change is the only real solution to this epidemic of the risk factors for non-communicable disease. You get rewards, you feel the rewards when you eat good food, when you do good exercise, when you stay away from dysfunctional activities, and you feel awful when you eat bad foods and you don't exercise and you do dysfunctional behaviors. So that is really not only a recipe for, putting yourself on a spiritual path, but also for staying alive and staying healthy.
Yeah, no, that really makes a lot of sense. The masters have said through Dr. King that there's only one crime in our world: ignorance.
Well, that's, and then you could say that that's basically lack of mind-body awareness. Just not being aware. I mean, yoga is the practice of developing awareness, as our contemplative practices like meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, and other contemplative practice, and Pranayama.
And people say that about karma. They don't understand how karma can affect them, but it's the same with that cheeseburger or that cigarette. Just because if you don't believe that the cigarette's going to hurt you, it's still going to hurt you. And it's the same with the law of karma. Ignorance is no excuse. So we're all writing our karmic pattern every moment of every day, and it's ignorance of that and many other laws of the universe, of our current state of the world, to blame. Great. Well, I could keep chatting to you all day, but I think I've got a message that I've got to change a nappy. So this is where I'm at in my current karmic cycle. So
been there, done that.
Yeah. But where can people follow you and learn more about your work? What's the best place to go?
Well, best place is really, to get into the venues in which I'm promoting. One is the annual symposium on yoga research that's held by the International Association of Yoga Therapists. This is an annual meeting. It's a 3-day symposium held at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health in Western Massachusetts. We've been holding it now. This is our 14th version coming up. And this is an opportunity for you to see and meet with all of the major yoga researchers in the field, to work with the trainees, with the yoga therapists that attend, to really get an appreciation of how far we've come in terms of an understanding of the scientific basis behind yoga practices, not only in terms of its therapeutic benefit, but in terms of its effect on overall functioning and health and wellness. So that's one way to.
What's the website for the symposium?
Yes, that is on the International Association of Yoga Therapists website. You go to the conferences link and you'll see SYR, SYR, which is the Symposium on Yoga Research. And I think if you Google the IAYT Symposium on Yoga Research, you'll get there pretty quickly. The other thing that we've just done recently, and this is more of interest to Kundalini Yoga teachers, is that we've had our first Kundalini Yoga Symposium. It was a 1-day symposium just a couple of weeks ago, in which we highlighted both the scientific research on Kundalini Yoga and also the many clinical applications of Kundalini Yoga for things like addictions in children and other special populations. And we are planning to have another symposium. On our Kundalini Research Institute website, we have research pages. And on those pages, people can find information on the research that's been done for Kundalini Yoga. And then, of course, I work with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, those people that are interested in the clinical application of yoga. We have an annual meeting called the Symposium on Yoga Therapy and Research, and that's coming up in June. That will be held in the south of the United States. And That is a large meeting. It brings together a lot of yoga therapists to share techniques and training and information in promoting the practice of yoga for therapeutic purposes. And the International Association of Yoga Therapists is probably the largest and most active organization promoting the use of yoga as a therapeutic intervention. The goal is to embed yoga ultimately into the modern healthcare system as a valuable practice and resource.
That's wonderful. The world needs people like you to build the bridge from the esoteric into the scientific. So that's wonderful.
And then probably the most accessible thing is going to be getting hold of our book, on which I served as the chief editor. This is called The Principles and Practice of Yoga in Healthcare. It's published by Handspring in the UK. And this is the only sort of medical textbook of its kind. It has 23 chapters, all written by yoga researchers known internationally. Each chapter summarizes the scientific rationale and the research that's been done on yoga for a specific disorder. So there's chapters on yoga for diabetes, yoga for weight management, yoga for cancer, yoga for anxiety, yoga for depression, et cetera, et cetera. And it really is a compendium of all of the research that's been done in that therapeutic venue. There's a strong introduction and summarizing the growth of yoga and the application of yoga in the general population and its benefits overall. So this is a really professional textbook, and really represents, what I consider our face to modern society and modern medicine, because it's really a scientifically based book. And then what's coming out as well within the next year is a smaller book, but written in the same vein. It's called The Principles and Practice of Yoga for Children and Adolescents. And it summarizes the research that's been done on yoga applied to children, both healthy and with disorders. And the chapters are written again by yoga researchers who have conducted research on yoga for children, showing improvements in functioning as well as reducing the symptoms of different disorders. Yeah, and that is also published by Handspring in the UK. We're just in the process now of getting to the copy edit stage, and so we should expect to see it published within a year or so.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'll put all the links to those ones that are already out in the show notes and the conferences, and people can pick up their copy. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about the Aetherius Society, they can go to aetherius.org. Thank you. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
That was really good. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Good. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.